Welcome back to Barneyjmusic. My name is Barney. I'm a classical composer and also founder and director of Barneyjmusic. In this series, I want to talk about something rather sobering, but I think we need to start having sobering conversations in the classical arts, and specifically those of us who are in the classical music industry. Okay? I'm definitely feeling like someone like I was lied to, okay, in a certain way, about the prospects of a job, about the reality out there. I definitely look back on my schooling and I think there's a lot that should have been done to prevent the catastrophe that is what is, okay? And I think a lot of classical musicians know exactly what I'm talking about, okay? And in today's episode, I'm going to be talking about getting a doctorate, looking for work, part-time work, adjunct work, and what are the options. And if you stick around to the end, I'm going to give some solutions. Before I get into all this, I'd like to lighten things up a little bit and play just a little bit of music from my opera ballet, which is called Salammbô. We're going to hear The Floods of Vengeance. What we just heard is from Salammbô, an opera ballet that I'm currently composing. So I thought I would like to first share my overall résumé, if it's in French, my overall, history, as I think this is something that many other classical musicians are going through, okay? So I would say I'm overeducated, okay? So I got a master's in music composition in America. I got my bachelor's as well in music composition in America. And I had 3 years in high school. I went to Walnut Hill, which is a performing arts high school in Massachusetts. And I was on tuba and switched to composition, okay? So already a lot of experience. And on top of that, I then moved to Paris, France to study 5 additional years in counterpoint and harmony and fugue, these very specialized studies. I want a very traditional study, okay? So I don't even want to add up all the years, but I'm assuming it's somewhere near 20 years of education, formal education, okay? On top of that, I have now 5 to 7 years teaching experience, depending how you count it, okay? I had 2 years teaching experience in America, and then the rest of my teaching experience was while living in France. So in America, I started teaching in 2015, and I was doing a lot of adjunct teaching. I taught at a community college. I taught music appreciation. I also taught a couple semesters a little bit upstate New York at university. I won't name it just yet, because I might have to talk smack later. I taught adjunct there, teaching like fundamentals of music or something like that. And I also taught at the JCC in Northern Jersey, okay, Jewish Community Center. They have a beautiful music program. That was a substitute teacher. So we're seeing a trend here, part-time work. And in addition, I taught at the Chamber Music Center in New York City. And again, super part-time, only weekends, or also there was summer work, okay? That was like 2 years before I moved to France. When I was in France, I did 1 year as a music teacher in an elementary school, a bilingual school, which is kind of cool. I got to still speak English and do my job, but it wasn't, really, it was so basic. I couldn't even really call it music. It's more just like, getting kids to have fun, which I was not very good at at the time. And then thereafter, because I had to finance my studies, I couldn't get work teaching music because I wasn't fluent in French at first. So I was teaching as an English teacher in France. And I taught with adults, I taught with kids, I taught in formal settings, informal settings, both in like private schools and public schools. Okay. So why am I saying all this? Well, I would say I have a lot of experience. Okay. Definitely when I first started teaching in America, the first 2 years, I definitely, I was new. Okay. But I would say my last year in France, it became comfortable. Like I knew what I was doing. And I do think it takes about 3 to 5 years to know, to be a good teacher, to really feel like you know how to be prepared, you know how to anticipate things, you know how to deal with classroom behavior. Okay. So why am I saying all this? Well, I have incredible amount of experience both in America and France. I have special skills that I learned in France that they don't offer in America. Like, where are you going to find a harmony teacher in America? Very difficult. Where are you going to find a counterpoint teacher? Very difficult. Don't even talk about fugue, okay? So I have and also I did orchestration in France at L'École Normale. So I have so many skills, okay? But the reality is, and I'm sure many of you, if you're a classical musician, or even if not, if you're in the classical arts, doing ballet or modern dance or writing, whatever, theater, all of it, math, science, I don't know, it's all classical. There are no jobs, okay? The reality is there are no jobs. There are no jobs, okay? Now, technically, one could say this isn't true. Okay, so I was living in France until like November 2022, and it just was not working out. I got fed up with schooling, the over-school year. We're going to talk about that in a little second. And I tried moving around. I tried getting jobs. My field was rebuffed. Nothing. And it got to the point where I was like looking at jobs as an English teacher with, working in the Paris school district, but the other people getting the jobs were people who had no experience. So it's like, hold up, this is all I can get? Like, this is it after all these years? Where is this golden paradise that was either promised to me or I believed in, and no one destroyed the illusion? And that is something I'll talk about at the very end, what I would do differently as a teacher. But I think these universities have an obligation to not only be honest with their students about the situation, and I think a lot of them are, because I definitely remember having a lot of teachers tell me there are no jobs or it's really bad out there. But here's the problem, okay? If you're at a school and you have a teacher that is honest and says there's no jobs, it's really bad, you can't believe that. And why can't you believe that? Well, it's a contradiction because they have a job. Do you see? So this is something we need to understand as classical musicians and classical artists in general, that at these institutions, by going to the institution, it presents a reality that is not a reality. So you're there as a student, and you see a teacher who's getting paid, and I have to say I think most of my teachers were living well. I don't mean to suggest that they were like overpaid, but they definitely seemed comfortable, and I felt like they were in a good place financially. I don't know, maybe they just never let on. Okay, so that experience of going to an institution and having a teacher, even if they're saying there's no jobs, but the fact that they have a job is giving you a false impression. Okay, because that's what you believe. You're not going to see the missing jobs. That you don't see until you need a job and you're like, there's no jobs. Okay, so anywho, so it didn't work out in France. There's no jobs there either. Okay, and they have a conservatory in every town in France, publicly available, and it's basically free or low cost. Okay, so there's a problem in general in the world. Anywho, so I come back to America, and I'm now like 5 years older, 5 years more experience, just had performances in France, definitely grew a lot, my music has opened up even more, like I can, so much to share, right? Nothing. There are no jobs. So my first thing was to send out my resume, just the resume, to a job that I previously worked for before. And something I forgot to mention was, so I worked 2 years in America before moving to France, and it was super part-time. The only way it worked was I was living at home. So I didn't have to pay rent, but these are starvation wages. Okay, starvation wages, which I think I should do a separate video on the scam that is adjunct teaching. It is a scam of the highest order, and I don't know how these politicians are getting away with not addressing it. Okay, they want to address everything as abortion, this and that. But hey, listen, there's a scandal before our eyes, which is adjunct teaching. It is a scam. It is starvation wages, and this is immoral that this is allowed to foster the way it is. So that's another video. But anywho, the point I want to make is, so by the end of my first 2 years trying to teach, teaching in here in America, living in Jersey, I was getting more opportunities, I would say. Not much, but one of the schools I was teaching at, they actually offered me a permanent position just for Sundays, okay? At they have a conservatory on Sundays, but it would have been 6 to 8 hours of work every Sunday, okay? And hey, the money was pretty good, okay? So I suppose if it stayed longer, maybe I would be in a better situation. But here's the problem for us, okay? The only way to really make it, aside from being glossing in on your Juilliard wings, is you have to stay in one place and you got to get to know people. But once that happens, let's say it takes 3 to 5 years, I think that's reasonable. Okay. A, is the money going to be good enough? Okay. Are you going to be able to grow? But B, what if you need to move? Okay. And the reality is some places are not affordable. Maybe you have a partner that needs to move for their job, wants to move. Maybe you don't feel safe in the environments that you have to teach at, okay? You want to go somewhere safer. Well, then you lose all that, right? So if I wanted to move to Miami, let's say I had employment in teaching here in New Jersey. If I wanted to move to Miami, I'd have to go there, not have any work, and try to hustle for another 2 to 3, 4, 5 years, okay? That's not acceptable. So another issue that we're facing, and I think it was always the case, is that we can't really move around, but there's a long history of classical musicians having to move around, right? Bach moved around a lot for someone at that time within Germany. I mean, think about it, how little people moved. Like he really moved around. Handel went to London. So definitely there is a history. But getting back to what I was talking about, I'm now back here in America, okay? Wiser, greater, I finished my orchestra piece, Help Is on the Way for orchestra, which is now on the market, okay? So I have a pretty stellar resume, I have to say, and I know that I'm an excellent teacher. There's no one can convince me otherwise. I've seen it myself. I've seen the results I get. I see the reaction of the parents, okay, because I involve the parents in education, big on parental involvement. So suffice it to say, I'm an excellent candidate, okay? However, there are no jobs. There are no jobs. And not only are there no jobs, there's another existential threat, for lack of a better word, And I think you, as a classical musician or as a classical artist, can probably resonate if you're in my age bracket. So, spoiler alert, I'm actually 35 years old, though I look younger. I am at a place where I can't have roommates anymore. Okay? My body will go into trauma if I'm ever stuck in a dormitory-like situation again, which I was doing in Paris. I can't have roommates anymore. It's not being bougie. I'm 35. And, for example, my sister just bought a house. I have other friends that are buying houses. I don't say that because I'm jealous or anything, but there are certain things as you get older you need to do. Like, you're going to want to start a family. That's something a lot of us in the classical arts, it's impossible to do because we have to move around a lot for education, especially when you want the best education. I had to move to France to get things I couldn't get in America, right? Highest was to have a partner if you're moving around. So I'm trying to show everyone, hopefully you see where I'm going, is that we've made a lot of sacrifices for this. But there is no golden calf at the end of it. There are no jobs. There are no jobs. Okay? So now it brings us to the question of the doctorate. Okay? And now that I'm back here, now I do have a solution, okay, at the end. So stick around to the end. But still, not everyone has the time or the resources to implement the solution. Okay, so I'm back here in America, and some people are professors I'm still in touch with or friends in the classical music world are saying, well, why not get your doctorate? I can't tell you how angry I get when people say, I don't actually get angry, but it makes me really angry in a way. I left America because there's nothing really for me to learn from these schools. Like, I will say, I think it was important to get the master's. Because a lot of composers don't really get formal education until the bachelor's. I was lucky I got it because I went to Walnut Hill. But still, I think, the bachelor's at SUNY Purchase has been a lot of time just exploring, trying different things. I never really liked what I produced. And then by the master's, I was, finding my original voice or refining it, okay? So I do think the master's was very important. However, I then left. I started teaching, and then I eventually left to go to France to get a more classical education. Okay, so if I had wanted more education, I would have just stayed in France. But that as well, it was a scam. At a certain point, you're just stuck. And it's because the teacher is saying you're not good enough or suggesting you're good enough. But in reality, they're not much better. Like, they're not like these wise people. It's just when you have a student-teacher relationship, it gives the impression that the other person is more knowledgeable. So, for example, I have a series I just started called What the Fugue. And I talk about the fugue for the general public so they can understand what our industry and just love Bach and all that. But I don't know. Okay, yeah, I know more about the fugue than most people, but I don't feel like I'm a master of the fugue. I haven't even finished my first fugue ever. It's so difficult, right? But I'm doing it in front of the public. Okay, so why do I say I'm showing that? Well, it's not like I'm a master. It's just because I have a certain confidence level. I feel comfortable. There's a familiarity that I seem like maybe like an expert. So what happens with a lot of these schools, and this is more the case in France, is that you go to an expert, but they don't want your liberation. So they keep you thinking, oh, well, you don't know this about Bach, you don't know this about Bach, but they don't know. Okay. One thing I hated is when my teachers demonstrate something on piano, and it's like, you don't understand, what are you doing? But they couldn't do it the other way around. Like, if I start demonstrating something on piano, they don't know they're like, what notes are you doing? Right? So again, I'm just pointing out that at a certain point, you don't need a teacher. Okay, so for me, if I have a question about something, I first look at my own works, right? Because I look at my previous works, how do I solve these situations, what is in congruence with my style, what do I do? Or I'll go directly to Bach or to Beethoven, okay? Those are my masters, or Debussy, or whoever, right? I can look at the score, and that is a greater teacher than going to some school, okay? Now, another minor issue I have, let's get a drink of water. Another minor issue, but it is, I think it's going to be a big issue, is let's say I even got a teaching job at one of these universities. I have no desire to teach Schoenberg or Webern or Ligeti. I mean, Ligeti I like a little bit better, but still, for me, if I'm going to teach composition, I want to teach Bach and Beethoven. Okay, first of all, I'd certainly like whatever the composer wants, like, in the lesson that's individualized. But in terms of models, I would be teaching Bach and Beethoven for sure. Like that would be the heart. And you don't really get that in universities. And another thing is like, right now I'm really focused on opera, and like what you just heard from Salammbô, it's an opera ballet. They don't teach that in composition in university. In fact, they kind of are like very ignorant about the voice. Luckily in grad school, I had a teacher, Joe Fagan, who really instilled an appreciation for the past and Bach and the voice and all that, and opera. But in general, most schools don't really teach you in the composition world about opera. Or, God forbid, and it's like something where it's like, it's not even opera. I said it. So again, it's like, why would I even want to go back when I don't want to teach these things? I want to teach what I know. It's classical composition. The music certainly isn't, married to the past, but it's very important. Okay. So there's that problem. And another problem that I see, and I hesitate to talk about it because people are so quick to throw labels at you. It's a conspiracy theory. But I see what's happened to teachers, and I have my own experiences while working as an adjunct professor, and I'll try to leave some time to talk about the scandal that is part-time teaching in America. But I don't feel comfortable teaching in universities because I don't feel comfortable investing in a place that can fire me like that. I can't snap my fingers, okay? And we've seen, especially with cancel culture, all you need is someone with a camera, and they take one slice, one thing out of context, add a story to it. This professor is racist, this professor, whatever. And what happens? The public goes bananas, the media blasts it up. No one knows what actually happened. No one actually sees the context, sees that one thing in the context. And you may think, well, that's just extreme. Well, listen, it's not extreme, okay? We've seen a lot of professors get attacked. Not all of it makes the media, but there was one incident I know of, I forget, somewhere in the Midwest, and involving blackface. And the kids, whatever, let's not even get there. But what I want to impart on everyone is, so this stable job, the professorship is not stable, because we're living in an environment where we have politicians on both sides. We have the Democrats and we have the Republicans in America, who are forcing their political agenda on teachers. And I've seen a number of people on both sides, trying to tell teachers what they can and can't do in the classroom. I remember as a teacher, when I was my first 2 years teaching, I could have gotten on Fox News or something, because it was a music appreciation class. And the kids were not feeling the classical music. They were not into it. So I was like, okay, fine, let's do, something they like. So I did some Kendrick Lamar, who's a rapper. And then I had 2 students who had to leave the classroom because it offended their religious beliefs. I mean, how ridiculous, how ridiculous. Now, luckily, it didn't escalate into a scandal, but it very easily could have escalated into a scandal, and then I could have been fired, okay? In addition, I've seen post-COVID, I know no one likes to talk about it, but it has to be talked about. I mean, some of the excuses, it's a burden for professors now. So certain colleges, they're giving students mental health days. I want a mental health day. We all want mental health days, but no, you need to work. Okay? So then it's like, well, I'm a professor, and then the kid needs their mental health. This kid needs this needs this. Well, I can't plan a class if there's 50 exceptions. Now, I hope the class wouldn't have 50 students, but I should be able to plan one class, one size fits all, okay? Now, it takes time to get to know the class, but still, it's a one size fits all. The students have to adapt to the teacher, okay? But now what we're seeing is everyone is an individual, and everyone's individuality has to be honored and respected by the teacher. I think this is crazy, okay? And I couldn't imagine going into a classroom and having to cater to a teenager, essentially. I know in college, 19, 20, 21, not technically not a teenager, but I couldn't imagine after all these years, all the debt I racked up, going to a foreign country. I couldn't imagine then going in and taking orders from a teenager, from a student, taking orders. And that is what I'm seeing. And it's my own experience, even just being an adjunct. I had one case I remember where I took a student's test away because he was cheating. He was clearly cheating. And then what does the student do? He goes to administration, and administration at these colleges is a business. It's a business. And then what they did was extremely dishonorable. They sat me down across from the student as if I was their equal, as if we were two buddies at the playground, and we had to resolve this together. I mean, it's absolutely crazy, okay? And I'm seeing more and more colleges are moving in this direction where they are treating the professors as dispensable, especially the adjunct professors. I'd like to talk about the scandal that is part-time teaching in America. But first I want to talk about, just a second. Yeah. So now there's the issue, there's no jobs. Now, technically, what's that site? Higher Ed. I forget what the site where you can check for professorships. Okay. I haven't applied, okay, for a couple of reasons. I just don't think it's worth the effort because I don't think I'll get the job. Because I don't think my experiences are going to be recognized by universities, okay, because I don't have the doctorate. And the reality is everyone knows that, you need the doctorate. Now, technically, colleges or universities will say, doctorate preferred, or, we will take masters if you have the right experience. But this is a hoax. It's a hoax, okay? When does it happen? How often does it happen? Who, with just a master's, gets a full-time position? No one. Now, maybe, okay, but here's the other issue. Suppose I did all the work, and the work that they require, like the letters of recommendation, I mean, that itself I have an issue with because I've been out of school now, out of American school, for since 2014. So what's it? Almost 10 years, let's say 9 years. Okay. Now I just finished doing 5 years in France. But what, am I going to get a letter of recommendation in French? Then translate it? Okay. In addition, in France, they don't really do that. And your relationships with your teachers in France are not like it's in America. In France, they would never, like if I asked them to do a letter of recommendation, they'd say no. Or they wouldn't even respond. They just wouldn't respond. Okay, so I do have contacts still in America, but what I've realized now that I'm not a student and I am working, that it's a burden to do a letter of recommendation. Okay, now if you are a full-time professor in university, it's assumed to be part of your job and you have that protection. But if you're not, it is a huge burden on someone's time to do a letter of recommendation. Okay. So I don't even know who I would go to for these other recommendations. Do I have to pay people to do it? So already the application process is like, if I believed in it, I don't think, okay, fine, letter of recommendation, that could be found, right? But given the hurdles that are in place, it's seeming less and less appetizing. And my big concern is, let's say I found a job and I felt like I had a shot at getting it. Okay. Again, that's not the reality. I know that because I have a master's and not a doctorate, and the fact that people are desperate for jobs is true. Okay. For any university position, people are desperate for jobs. I know from the start I have no negotiating power. Because what are they going to say? Well, this is based on the grid. They'll show you some stupid grid that they have, so they can cover their asses. And they'll say, if you have the doctorate, we could offer this much, but you don't have the doctorate. So I know already that if I don't get the doctorate, that let me just check on the time. If I don't pursue the doctorate, that even if I am eligible for jobs, I will never get the top pay. But why do I need a doctorate? I don't know what more they want me to do. I'm a professional composer. I just publish my orchestra work. And orchestra work, 5 movements, okay? First half of a program, okay? So I have done significant work. This is professional level. What more do I need from a doctorate? I just cannot understand, okay? I just do understand. I think the whole getting a doctorate thing is a scam at this point. It's a scam, okay? Now, is it a scam in the sense they're all like, administrators are gathering behind closed doors? No, it's not in that sense. But it's truly unnecessary, okay? But of course, the market is, it's impossible, okay? So even if they passed a law and said, oh, you can't require the doctorate, they still would look at that, okay? And that brings us to kind of the central theme of the series and who can actually afford a doctorate, okay? Now, in music, yes, if I were to get a doctorate, first of all, it would be paid for. And I'm assuming there would be a living stipend, okay? But going back to something I talked about earlier, I'm 35, okay? I can't live, in a dormitory. And I don't think these doctoral programs are going to pay enough that people can live in their own apartment, okay? A lot of these conservatories are in, very expensive areas of the country, okay? So how am I going to live? I'm not going to live in a dormitory again. I'm not going to live with roommates. I'm 35. I have to live my life, right? We can't be schooled forever. So again, I don't see the incentive of getting a doctorate. And again, that brings me to the point I want to make about the series is who can get the doctorate, Who could do the doctorate, okay? Now, I have friends that do the doctorate. I know people who did the doctorate. But I think not everyone can do it, think about how long you were out of the job market. And that's another thing that someone helped me realize a couple of years ago, a little further back, is given that we are in school for so long, we don't have any savings. We're not contributing we're not in a pension system. Now, a lot of us, I had to work throughout my schooling, okay, from my master's onward. 1 year in my master's, I didn't have to work. Fortunately, I had a scholarship. But throughout Paris, I was working the entire time, okay? So, yeah, I'm contributing a little bit, I get a little bit of a pension at some point, but it's not much. So we're spending all these years and years and years out of the workforce, and what do we have for it? Who can get the doctorate? And I don't mean that to insult people who have gotten the doctorate. I think that great for them, but I think a lot of them are very privileged. Okay, and I'm saying as someone who is privileged. Okay, I was able to go to a private high school. Okay, so I'm from Walnut Hill, so I have a lot. But even myself, coming from, I don't know if I'm the upper middle class or I think I'm the upper middle class. Let's go with that. At this point, I'm 35. I'm stretched. I have debt from 10 years ago that hasn't gone away. It's only gotten bigger. When I finished my master's, I moved to Northern California and didn't work out. But the problem is I couldn't afford to move back home. I couldn't afford it. I was making $14 an hour in a call center with a master's in music. And so I accrued debt just to get back home. And then I was looking for work as a part-time teacher. And when you're a part-time teacher, I think we'll get to part-time teaching now, it's kind of hard to take on additional work because the hours that you have to work, like I was teaching Tuesdays and Fridays, I think, at SUNY New Paltz. So I was in Jersey, so the drive all up to New Paltz, 2-hour drive. Okay. Now they did pay for the gas. That was good. There was a stipend, but still it wasn't much. Okay. And so that was for a class that was maybe an hour and a half, and I had to be there an hour beforehand for like office hours, which we're going to talk about the scam of office hours soon. Another episode. But so I suffice it to say, on like a Tuesday and a Friday, I couldn't do other work. It was a whole day endeavor. Got to drive 2 hours up there, okay, and then drive 2 hours back, okay. Avoid the rush hour traffic. I mean, couldn't do much, okay. Got to plan the classes as well. So I found when I was part-time teaching, even though the wages were not enough to live off of, it was hard to find another job, even if it was a part-time job in a restaurant, that could stagger those other days. Otherwise, you go completely exhausted, right? I'd now like to talk about some of my solutions. I think the first thing I would like to do when I have students, okay, and again, it's like if you're not attached to the conservatory, how are you going to get the students, okay? But there are ways. I think the first thing is I would make it very clear to know, are they doing composition just for pleasure? You know, like let's say you're in a chamber group and you want to learn how to compose for your group, or is it for your life? This is your profession, okay? That's something I would have done anyway, you know, before all this. But that's the first distinction I want to know. Because if my student is intending to do this as a career, then I'm going to be training them from the start. The first thing I do is like, you're going to publish your works, okay? If I was a teacher at a conservatory, I want to do another video where I develop this idea more. I would require after the first semester, every composer has their website up and they will get a grade for it. And I will see, is the website professional? And they'll get a grade, you know, and if it's an F, it's an F. But they need to know, okay? Now, definitely, they still need the pure classes where it's just, you know, composition. But I would do other classes. I would be like, you know, and by the end of the first school year, you know, they need to have something for sale on their site, you know, a score, recording, something, so that by the time they graduate, this thing is natural and they're not like me and you who are trying to just scraping through the mud, trying to figure out what works, when really this should have been happening while we're in school. Why didn't they prepare us for this? There are some basic things. Composers can publish their works. That's what I'm starting to do now. You can sell sheet music. There's a lot you can do, but it's hard to do it when you need it, right? When the job market sucks and you don't have any work and you have the time, you crunch, you know, it's hard to do it. So that's something I would do.